Sweet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
So yeah, this is this is interesting, and I'm excited to chat about it because it's been on my mind for a while because I had a lot of firsthand experience with it while I was in the Gulf. And then you brought an interesting perspective up the other day, and I was like, man, I really hope you like the idea of chatting about this because I've been itching to like make a comment on Facebook or something to engage people into discussion with this, but it's such a unique topic. So we'll dive into discussing this situation with Venezuela and and then I have another direction I want to go with it later because I actually shared a conversation with my sister who works as an epidemiologist, and a lot of the people she witnesses are people who have been affected by drugs. And so that was an interesting conversation, and it didn't go as far as I wanted it to, but there's a lot
Yeah.
of deep questions I have that I want to, I want to challenge good brains with and come up with solutions to stuff that is clearly an issue.
Right. Right. Well, the one of the most challenging things that we're faced with is, you know, disinformation or, people's agendas, and so you have to really slow down and read things carefully and have discernment in this day a lot. So it can be a challenge.
Yeah. Is that
Yeah.
why
So,
you, is that why you said what you
so
did?
you want to, yeah. So my post, is that what you want to talk about? Right.
Well, let's start there because I feel like one, there's a divide with our country, and that's pretty apparent. And that's a
Yeah.
problem, to be honest, because, you know, a house divided against itself falls. And everybody knows that. Everybody knows the history of the Roman Empire, and anybody with a religious background, we're both religious. We believe in the teachings of the Bible, and so that's the first problem. And so we're very split down the middle with this situation with Venezuela, and it's escalated steadily, but faster than many might have expected. Um, but there's two halves of it, and even I saw a political post the other day with with it was mocking Democrats for crying about the graves of fishermen and ignoring the graves on the other side of this comical post of all the people who died from drugs. And to some degree, it was funny. Initially, the part of me that uh, leans towards being conservative liked it, but there was also a part of me that understood the reality that there's people being hurt on both sides. I see that there is some truth in what each party is saying. And so, like you said, deciphering the truth in the narrative and having clarity about it is, yeah, that's the place to start.
Yeah. Well, I guess I was coming from, from a place of experience with addiction. First of all, that's a near and dear topic, and you know, my existence, my purpose for being here is to help people who have been through addiction. And I was delivered like over 21 years ago, and I lived 12 years in active addiction. Um, you know, it was mostly just trash can top, addictions where I would just do basically anything. And so my mother, she passed away, I think it was 8 years ago, maybe a little less, but she had an accidental drug overdose uh, from medicines that the doctors were giving her. my dad, he had an accident on the job working for the state. Um, and the medicines that he was on, he was taking were prescribed by a doctor, but on the pill bottle itself, it says, don't operate heavy machinery. And he
Right.
did. They had let him for a long time, and I always questioned it, but I'm not the boss. But anyway, um, yeah, so he had an accident doing some of that, whatever, and he died really fast with that. So, and then my brother, they had a bad accident while he was high and this and that. So he's been clean now for about 4 or 5 years. So that's amazing. And of course, with my church, man, like we minister a lot to men's and women's rehab. We do a celebrate recovery every Wednesday. And so yeah, I mean, drugs, recovery, that's a big deal for me. I guess I don't want to say sensitive about it, but it's
Life is
something that is
close.
is close to my heart. So when I'm hearing about these boats being you know, bombed and they're carrying drugs, I'm like, you know, that to me is not a bad thing. I
Right.
think if they could stop the drugs from getting here, that's a good thing. And you know, and so across every party, whether it be Democrat or Republican, you see them come out now, and they're both saying that the guy was not a good guy. He was into the drugs. He was, even saying that the the election was illegitimate and like he was not really
Sure.
their president. There was things that happened, and so they were basically just oppressed by this guy, and so and of course, nobody's saying there wasn't any indictments. There were indictments against him for crimes against America, and so all the Venezuelans, you watch the videos, they're so excited and happy, and then for me, I'm like, I start seeing these posts where people are protesting,
Yeah.
that this guy was brought to America for his crimes, and even I mean, just like supporting this guy, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this don't even seem like I'm in Twilight Land or something, and I,
Yeah.
I can't understand why people would beef, and like, I mean, as a human, like God wants all men to be saved. That's not what I mean. I don't mean it like that, but yeah, I mean, if you're gonna do things like this, man, like you need to be brought to justice. That's just how it is. Oh, millions of people are being oppressed and killed. A lot of blood on his hands. So yeah, that's kind of where I was coming from with the post. And I am glad to see that somebody was doing something about it. The I mean, it was obviously a successful mission. They were extracted the guy with no casualties from the United States. And so they don't he ain't going over there and causing this messy war. Not a lot of people's dying. It's just boom, get him out, and he's already
Yeah.
been to court. I mean, he's literally on trial, whatever right now. So uh, I support that. I'm concerned, how far the current president may take that. Is he wanting to do other countries or dictators or whatever? And that's a concern for me because obviously we don't want to get in some big huge war or whatever. But
Right. We don't
but
want to,
yeah, man,
yeah,
that's
pick a
where I was
fight with
coming
everybody.
from. No, I mean, and overreaching is definitely something that I feel like President Trump has done or could do, and that's a concern for me. I'm not like a Trumper. Okay.
Right.
I don't have a Trump syndrome. I actually, my wife is more libertarian. I'm actually considering, the libertarian party more so, just because that you see with the Trump, make America, all that. It's just outside of my values sometimes, and I don't want to be cruel. I don't want to be unkind. I want to be accepting and loving and caring. And I'm not going to make fun of people or just because you disagree with me and I'm just going to talk to you like trash. I don't like how the man talks sometimes. I don't agree with everything that he does. And so, yeah, I mean, I can't, and I'm not really a political person. My posts sometimes may be political, but I don't want to be as much as I want to be spiritual and Christian, and like it just sometimes, man, I just get upset, because, like I said, I lost my mom and dad to some things and it's been tough and I had my own battle and we get in there and we sit with these men and women and we sit with them and we let them hurt, and we help them and we don't want to see that, we want to see our country protected from
Healed.
stuff like that,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, your
So
family has had this history of addiction. You have conquered it, and that's a huge win. I mean, I know other people too who ex-alcoholics, ex-drug addicts, etc. I mean, what a blessing. I mean, that's all. I mean, that's it's
amen.
not a joke. It's not something to be taken lightly at all. And then to take it a step further, you put yourself in the thick of it consistently, as most recovered addicts do, and you're still helping people who are on the road to recovery or who have recovered. So you're still immersed in the everyday battle, so to speak, and the reality of the harm of drugs and alcohol or any addiction. Um, and I'm always amused when I run into people who do the same thing, right? And it's such a noble job, but they share a different opinion where they don't know how to solve the problem, which is fair. I mean, how do you? That's tough, right? Especially in a godless country. Um, but they it just seems like there's a lot of, going back to what you said earlier, a lot of lack of clarity. And I would say that clarity is in personal values, which is fair because I mean, whoever learned personal values, I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have learned it when I did maybe a year ago, thanks to people like Sven. But it's really hard to distinguish what's more important, cutting off the drug source into at least into our country, right? Help ourselves first if we can, or, you know, the lives of innocent people who are being manipulated by the cartel or by, whoever's pushing the drugs. Um, and yeah, that is a really tough decision, but I feel like if you have that kind of experience of working firsthand and seeing the situation in a lot of the cities, and I'm sure it doesn't even need, you don't even need to look to the cities. I'm sure you witness it all the time in rural parts of Alabama, or any area near you. Um, it just kind of astounds me, and yeah, it frustrates me too, to be honest. Um, how how people have a hard time saying no to they're happy and gracious to help people in addiction, but they struggle to say, let's cut off the source of drugs into our country. I mean, that should be an outright no-brainer. But again, it's all about me
Yeah.
obtaining clarity on their points of view and trying to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I've buried uh, one of my best friend's son. He got some kind of pain pills, but it had fentanyl on it,
Yeah.
and that is a very serious thing that's been happening when I was doing drugs. Fentanyl wasn't a thing. We didn't have to be concerned about, well, did somebody dip it on these pills or this acid or whatever, but now you do, right? And so there's so many people that have died and didn't know they were taking fentanyl,
Right.
and that is just, it's just so bad. And also I think, for an addict, it wouldn't matter if you was to cut off the drugs. An addict's going to find some way to numb themselves and to try to get their needs met, which is what I've learned is really the source of the problem
Right.
is
It's
they
always
they
internal.
grew up and they didn't have their needs met properly. And I'm not blaming mom and dad all the time. That's not necessarily we spiritually Christian wise, like there's sinful nature, there's this and that, but overall, if you look at it as a lack of a need that you're not meeting in your life, and you're trying to meet that need through a strategy with drugs and numbing and the pain of not having your need met, then yeah, I mean, if you begin to learn what your needs are and you meet those needs yourself, man, you just don't. It'll dry up, and
Right.
that's what I try to teach the men. And I'm going Thursday night to teach them, but that's what I try to teach the people is just try to keep it simple. The solution and there's church and knees. You can hear, and I'm not knocking the church. I love the church. I'm part of it, but you always hear like Jesus is answer this and that, and yes, he is. And but go deeper, right? That's what I tell them. Hey, let's go a little deeper because we see a lot of relapse, and there is a high percentage of relapse in drug addiction. There's only unfortunately a small amount of people that stay in recovery, and
Right.
that can be changed. I feel like we just need to go deep. We need to be upfront and honest about what the truth is, and cut out the churchanese, man. Cut out the religious talk, and really get honest with them, and just but also care about them. I think that's one of the things, the challenges that we see across the nation and the world is caring about each other overall. And a lot of people are not going to listen to you unless they know that you care,
Right.
and so people need people. One of the biggest needs that I see we're not having met is connection. And we think we're connecting when we pick up social media. And for me,
Well,
I've
what an example
experienced
of not being
disconnection more so, right? Experienced more disconnection with social media than I have connection. And so when we do this, have a conversation, just honest, no judgment, just conversation, that's real connection where we could be honest. And they need that connection, real connection, and then they need to somebody to sit with them. And so that's what I try to do is invite the Holy Spirit, invite God, and help to sit with them and listen to their pain, and let them know they're safe, and and also the nervous system. It's a big issue. We really need to feel safe, and when our nervous system is just left to on its own, and we don't have that self control, and our mind's not being renewed, man, it can just really control our life. And we think the bear's chasing us all the time. We go through so much pain and whatnot from that we begin to slip back into these old patterns and old habits, right? But but yeah, you can, like I said, you can cut off the drugs, which is great. They can't get them, that's great, and they're going to find something. For instance, you go to any convenience store usually and find drugs, illegal, drugs on top of the counter. We have men in our rehabs in our church that they relapse all the time on these things. They'll be messed up. One of them got so messed up on it, he was in the hospital, nearly died because of whatever this stuff was. I don't know the name of it. Some of them is called like Blue Dawn, Blue Horizon. I don't know,
but it's just an average
but
drugstore
that's like,
item.
yeah, it's like over the counter stuff that people make. It's like some of it's maybe, THC maybe in it or some form of it, or it's just it's like an energy shot, and it's supposed to be calming or euphoric, or it just whatever they advertise. And I can't remember what the active ingredient is. Some of them in Alabama have actually been banned, and they'll go in and the drugs, alcohol, and tobacco, what ATF.
Yep.
Yeah, they'll go in and they'll seize it. But yeah, but the addicts, man, like they're hurting and they need a solution, and they'll find one. It could just be sex, but but I'm glad because to me, look, I don't like knocking any president that much, but the past two presidents like Obama and Biden, they had an opportunity to take this guy out, and they didn't.
Right.
And so I have to wonder why. Why didn't you guys try to do something? If he was that bad of a guy, if he had a $50 million bounty on his head and he'd been indicted, you know, why didn't you go?
Right.
You know, and so we may never know. And that's
Well,
where the Lord always brings me back to.
we know a lot of it's hypocrisy. I mean, that's pretty blatant. Yeah. Unfortunately. And it comes down to the individual, just like the healing from drug addiction comes down to the individual level. The cleaning
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
hypocrisy comes down to the individual level and your desire to see the truth. Um, but I had that firsthand experience too with some of this situation. This was just so I spent a couple years in the Gulf on and off for short patrols at the end of Trump's last term. And it was a godsend that he sent the Navy to help the Coast Guard while we were down there because we couldn't keep up with the drugs. I mean, we
Right.
captured millions of pounds of coke and marijuana, which I know marijuana is legal now and everybody has an opinion. So fine, we'll just focus on coke. But um,
Yeah.
like you said, it, there's still other things getting pushed through like fentanyl and um and it's killing people. And they're not even trying to take that on purpose. That's just something that's things are being laced with. But we were struggling on our own. And even with the Navy's help, we were still struggling. And so it's it is initially very sad for me to see people so upset that he engages the military down there like he did. But the truth was we'd been struggling all through the Biden administration, and just like you said, he could have done something about it. He didn't. So what? I'm not judging him for that. Um, Obama didn't do anything, right? So it's a shame because while it doesn't solve the problem, it is
Right.
definitely a huge help to not have, it's like if you're trying to lose weight,
Yeah.
yeah, it's your job to lose weight, but you sure hope your grandmother doesn't bring cookies over every day because damn, that just makes your life hard? So the
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
thing you want is the influx of drugs into your country. And the last thing I can't imagine anybody supporting is being upset that we're stopping the flow of drugs into our country. That just
Yeah.
so absurd, completely absurd. But
Right.
but the Coast
Right.
Guard has been struggling down there, and we needed more
Wow.
military. We needed more money. We needed more ships. We needed more eyes. We needed everything. We needed all of it. And people getting upset that they blew up a fishing boat, and it doesn't work very effectively the other way either, to be honest, because the Coast Guard would sink their boats, and we would capture the people on board the boat and bring them back to their country, and whoever was running it, whether it was the cartels or whoever, they'd send the same people right back into another boat full of drugs. And so I'm not saying
Yeah.
that that means anybody deserves to die. That's absolutely not my call to make. But
Right.
but they end
Right.
up right back out there moving more drugs because they're doing it at gunpoint. Their families are at gunpoint. I'm watching all these people on the
Yeah.
news from other countries in South America speak out against Trump and threaten him, and I really wouldn't be surprised if their families or themselves are at gunpoint too, and they say ridiculous things like, "Don't dare come near our country." It's like, you don't think big drugs and big money is behind this somewhere? Probably is. There's probably somewhere
Hmm.
fearful of losing another channel of income. And So the threats are kind of meaningless because I'm sure there's more going on in the background than even I can see.
True,
But it doesn't
true.
matter if you're blowing up the drug boat or sinking it and bringing the drugs, in a controlled way back to the states to give to the DEA to dispose of. You know, time is precious, and we're already,
Yeah,
people complain about the amount of money we spend on the military sending them down there. What do you think happens when we capture and detain prisoners and bring them back to their country? We spend more money doing that too. Everything costs something. So, you know,
right,
it's nothing's perfect. You can't expect the perfect result, but it's definitely a blessing to be preventing any amount, especially an increased amount of any sort of substance like that from coming into our country. Well, it's like if someone told you they were going to ship cancer in by the boatload, you wouldn't be excited about that, you
right,
it's the same thing. It's going to destroy our people, and it is destroying our people. It's like thank God that there's people like you who have survived it who can say, "Look, this is really bad. Let's, you know, like I've been there, I've seen the other side. Let's not go there, because I'm fortunate enough not to have suffered any form of a drug addiction, and that shouldn't be taken for granted by anybody.
right. Yeah. So, and look, I know that a president is not going to be the answer.
Right.
Like there's no way, and that's why I couldn't say I don't like bashing presidents because they're not God, and I don't look to them to be God. They're human, and they're gonna have faults and whatever, and so we expect them to be perfect. We want them to be perfect and make all the right decisions, and I wouldn't want the job because it sometimes some of those decisions would be very difficult. Um,
Yeah, imagine the
but
pressure.
I do. Oh, I can't imagine. And I know there's people that don't believe in God, and I could just hear them, just saying, "Hey, well, your God is so big and so sovereign. Like, why is this?" And my daddy was one who had a hard time with kids that are starving and this and that, and so that's a big question. That we may have to wait till we get to heaven to have some of those answers, but at the same time, it's like you know I some of the best blessings in my life have came from those challenges that I described, and and sometimes like my best friend, he's still out there doing drugs, and we buried his son, and it seems to not work out the way I want it to, but I believe in a grander plan. I believe that God is sovereign, and I used to have a real hard time with that, and I was mad at him for a long time. And I was like, hey, like I didn't get to choose my mom and my dad. And, I was raised in a home that was, they were active drug users and alcohol, was there and this and that. I didn't choose that, And so when I got old enough, I was 14 when I first tried marijuana. And for 12 years until I was 26, I struggled with everything and it almost killed me. But, you know, out of all of it, I feel very blessed to know God, to know His power, to know Jesus, and and that's what led me to Him. And so, if that's what it takes, for me, that's what it took. Is what it took. And so I just believe that it's hard to answer the bigger world problems that we see, like the drugs. You're like, God, why are we, why is this happening? But and that's a pretty deep, maybe a topic for another
Well,
time. But
but you bring up a good point because just like with God, some things aren't meant for us to know. And just like with the bigger world, some things aren't meant for us to fix. You know, our job is to show up every day and do the best we can. And that alone is, I mean, that's why Christianity refers to it as a cross. I mean, that is on its own, that is already such a heavy thing to do to walk up the hill of Calvary with your cross on your back. Just living your life
Right.
properly, whatever that means, and doing what you believe you need to do as a human being, if you can honestly look at that, is already such a hard challenge that you don't have to address a lot of these bigger world problems, and that's where you can give it up to God. Um, and
I agree.
like I said, the same thing goes for the reality of some of these mysteries. Is some things are just too deep of a mystery for us to understand. We don't understand ourselves. Human beings have been studying ourselves for ages, and we don't understand ourselves. But I actually do think there's a short answer that I'm going to throw in here to your other question. And the thing is, because I was challenged with this for a long time. You know, why does God let bad things happen? People used to throw that at me whenever I mentioned that I was Christian. Um, and you know, the answer's quite simple. It took me a while to understand it, but the thing is, God has to let bad things happen, or you don't have free will. You know, if God makes sure every only good things happen, then you don't have any choice, and you want choice. You don't think you want choice until you want choice. So, but the whole Trump is a dictator, Trump is a king, all this garbage. I mean, I called that out a few months ago for the ridiculousness that it is. And of course, you have to believe in God to see that it's not true, right? But as far as I'm concerned, any man who can acknowledge the existence of God, even if he's bluffing, to some degree, is humbling himself. Even if it's just a bluff and it turns out that I'm wrong and that, you know, everybody else is right and Trump does think he's a king and he's just throwing God's name around for the sake of it, right? Well, one, that's God's beef. That's not mine. But two,
Right.
that takes a lot of humility to acknowledge that you are not bigger than God. Um, and so, you know, the whole king thing is such a load of, such a waste of energy because there's so many people. We need that energy. We need that energy helping people in recovery. We need that energy, um, I don't know, anywhere else than standing on the street screaming at something that, you know, isn't a problem. But
Yeah.
one of the, so
Yeah.
you
No,
started
I
diving,
don't really get into that.
yeah. One of the things you started diving into
The
though.
whole king thing, I don't know.
Doesn't
Sorry. Go
matter.
ahead.
I brought it up briefly because somewhere it got mentioned, but it doesn't matter. You talked about the actual
Okay.
solution to solving drug addiction and what it actually takes and how you helped yourself and how you've been helping other people. Um, and this was something I wanted to talk about because it is a problem and it is a problem worth solving and the solution will help so many people. And that in itself is enough proof for me that it is a right course of action. But I brought this up with my sister because she works as an epidemiologist, which uh, is someone who studies diseases and studies how they impact a society or a culture and how they spread and stuff like that. And she's very good at her job. And so one of the things that
Cool.
was a problem that she studies is drug use. And I posed the question, you know, how do you handle this problem? Because probably most of the homeless people in the United States have a drug problem, if I had to guess. Um, and the number of people with a drug problem, whether they're homeless or not, pose a huge burden on our healthcare system, right? Not that we don't want to help people who need healthcare, but you know, if we can help drug addicts so that they aren't a burden on our healthcare system, that frees up our healthcare system to help people who are genuinely ill and genuinely need help. Um, so how do we go about addressing this problem where not only are these folks struggling with a drug addiction, but then they're using, needles that are contaminated and they're ending up with really bad illnesses and stuff like, I think sepsis is one of the most common ones where, their limbs are all swollen and infected and untreatable and all this other stuff that only takes a bad problem and really, um, blooms it into something even big and worse that really impacts even more people than it already was hurting already. Where do you think that
Yeah.
starts?
So it's a good question. You know, I think both. So Narcotics Anonymous, they believe that it's a disease, and so
Right.
that's where you would start. What is your belief about addiction? Where does it come from? What's the source? Um, I used to say that, and I would say, yeah, I had the disease of addiction when I was saved. Jesus healed me by his stripes. We were healed, and I'm no longer, I don't have that disease. He cured me from that disease. And so in NA, Narcotics Anonymous, they don't go that route, and I respect that totally because that's where I first started was in NA, and I understand that they think that it could relapse, right? And yes, I even had a relapse, so I understand where they're coming from. And so I did a lot of work on men's work uh, and a lot of work with things like shadow work, Carl Jung, um, Gober, what's his name? I forget his last name. But anyway, through my studies, I have come to understand for myself that addiction or alcoholism is a symptom of a deeper issue.
Right.
It is actually, for me, it is a strategy. Okay.
Right.
It's a strategy to meet a need
It's a solution in
in
your
my
mind.
life. Right. That met a need. Needs are not hard to find. You can get on the internet and find the needs. I can't remember his name. It developed the chart. And I've actually used this chart in our Celebrate Recovery to show people. So basically, needs like safety, affirmation, um, needs for connection. Whenever those needs are not met as a child, then you begin to have pain. You
Right.
begin to have a internal indicator, just like a dashboard has a red light that pops up when your engine is not running correctly and you need to fix it. There's something going on with it, right? Same thing with us. Just like when we get hungry, what do we have? We have hunger pains. When we get thirsty, we have a feeling that says, "Man, I'm thirsty." Right? When you get lonely, you need connection. You start feeling all these things are needs that haven't been met. And so for me, when I learned how to meet those needs properly, then the pain went away. But now addiction is like it takes so long to kind of detox off of the medicine or off of the drug because your body's going to crave it for so long,
Right. There's a
you
healing
know.
portion.
That's Yes, that's not a disease, right? I mean, that's you just literally,
That's
like
a normal
been
response.
ingesting. Right, like you get to eating certain foods every day, you're going to crave that food. Sugar's the same way.
Right.
You'll crave sugar, you'll crave a soda, whatever. And so once you detox off of it, though, and you start doing the 12-step program, which is a great program. I do it. I use Celebrate Recovery. The principles are totally there. It's in the Beatitudes, in the New Testament. And you look at that and every one of those are needs.
Hmm.
Every single one of those are needs. And so you learn that, God says in His Word that He has supplied all of our needs according to His riches and glory. And so it's literally all there. We just have to learn, our part in it and receiving those needs like affirmation, validation, the need for safety. And so it is through our renewing of our minds, because our minds is that thinking, that system of beliefs. And so we strategize when we were kids to meet those needs to try to survive. We use these coping mechanisms. And one of the things that you might have got into was drugs, was alcohol, was pornography. It may have been, you know, sexual things. You found porn when you was a kid in your dad's closet, blah, 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 your phone now, right? It's everywhere. So that became your strategy. That became your source. That became your idol that you worship. Worship is happening all the time.
That's right.
Worship is our source of needs that need to be met, right? And so when you finally realize that, oh man, God's got all this done for me, like I now have to work together with Him. He said we're fellow workers, you know, and He said we're doers of the word. Faith without works is dead. These things, we come to Him, we have fellowship with Him. If we do these things, we will walk in the light as He is in the light. We'll be free. We'll come to know the truth. If we seek Him with all our heart, He will reward us. We'll find Him. We'll keep on asking and knocking. Boom. We realize more and more and more as the eyes of our heart are enlightened and awakened that we really are safe, that we really are valuable, that we really have worth. And we've had it all along, but we started to try to meet that need for worth and we put it in other things. We
But
put it in people.
let me ask, I want to make sure I understand something, and then I have a couple of questions. The first is it sounds like you're saying that through helping each other discover our needs and which ones aren't being met, or which ones we're meeting specifically with this strategy of addiction, this is how we help people overcome addiction. This is the root place to start. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And my first question would be, do you believe that unmet needs are the sole reason for addiction, or do you believe there are other reasons people are addicted that are outside of needs?
Oh, so okay. So I don't think I think that we have a flesh, okay? All right, so that's biblical. And that's
Sure.
not something you're going to hear in NA and AA, right?
Right.
So we have a nature inside of us that we also have to deal with. Okay, so that's the second part, that you will desire something, and this is where my
Right.
studies have gotten to, because I'm like, well, God, like I get Carl Jung and I get shadow work and I understand needs not being met, and that brings you pain and discomfort, and then you're trying to cope with the pain and blah blah blah. Well, what about your flesh?
But there's a
What about
disciplinarian aspect too, is what you're saying.
yeah, like what about the evil desires within you that you have to crucify daily, that you have to say no to, like so it ain't necessarily maybe a lack in your life that's causing the pain, but you literally have a temptation for something, which
Mhm.
most of the time, like even with the book I gave you, unwanted, um, it really, was very clear about how sexual desires, it will come up in sexual desires, and then they realize, oh, when I was a kid, this happened, this didn't happen. So he's playing that out in his sexual desires as an adult, you know, but still, like there's just got to be something to it, Andrew, about our flesh. And
Yeah.
so you're like, I don't even know why. Like I'm just tempted to go and do this or not do that. You know, I mean, it's not healthy for us not to exercise or
Sure.
not to, you know,
We have to
get
take care
up
of
and move our
ourselves.
bodies.
Yeah.
Man, there's so many obesity is huge. Heart disease is the biggest killer in the United States. I mean,
Right.
it's so
Yeah.
yeah, but but
So
it's
it's
not always like that. But yeah,
but it's dualistic, and the first part is meeting your needs or helping people meet their needs, and the second part is
yeah,
understanding
totally.
that you have to crucify your flesh. I mean, there's a reason why sin, for example, is such a huge message in Christianity, and
Yeah,
why there is a right and wrong, because there are some things that we desire, right? And it's fine to desire things, but it's not always right to act on them. Um, And so that's good because those are two huge places to start from, which, if someone watches this and gets nothing else out of it, at least they're able to start at two groundbreaking pieces of understanding that, where have you heard that before? I mean, this is why I love having these conversations, is because most people haven't. I haven't sometimes. Sometimes this is the first time I talk about this stuff. I've never heard, the importance of having your needs met. And the failure to do that results in addiction. I mean, it makes sense, but it's just not something I've thought about. And it's certainly not something I've thought about in terms of how to approach those who are suffering or struggling with such a challenge. Um, my other question is, what do you do in terms of this understanding? Because you and I are super blessed, in my opinion, to have a grounded belief in Jesus Christ and in God and in religion and faith, because with that, I believe comes like to put it in a kind of a silly way, it's like a package deal. It's like if you believe in Jesus, then you automatically understand you need to trust him. You automatically have someone to surrender to. You understand that you need to prioritize love, even though it's going to be a challenge. You understand that you are loved always. You understand that you know, all these things, all these good things just from identifying with religion and believing in God. But what about the people who are struggling with addiction or who help people with addiction who don't want to acknowledge the existence of God?
right. So Tim Fletcher is the guru when it comes to my guru.
Yeah,
When it comes to learning the needs, addiction. Um, he has got so much material. He's on YouTube, Tim Fletcher. But anyway, so yeah, I mean that's the reason why I
Tim
support
Fletcher.
Narcotics Anonymous wholeheartedly. I went there. They were men and women. The program promises that if you work these 12 steps, if you apply these principles in your life,
Right,
that you will find sobriety. You will do it, and you will. I did it. And so it's not faith based, and that's okay.
right,
Totally okay. Um, they use the term higher power.
right.
And so yeah, you will choose a higher power, but it doesn't have to be Jesus Christ. And with all
Okay,
my heart, I'm telling you, I know with all my heart that NAAA was to me was given by God. I just believe that with all my heart, you know. And it's such a sweet thing because you think, man, if I created people and they're upset with me and they don't know me and they're addicted and they're alcohol whatever, and I want to help, and I understand, like, it may take them a minute, I gotta start crying because it's just so sweet that he would
right,
give us those programs on this earth to help us to get sober for a while and get clean and actually begin to put like, no, that's a lie. I'm believing lies, and and not necessarily about God, but that was one of the biggest things, even to this day after 21 years is that renewing of your mind. There is so many things that I found that's not true for me that was running in my subconscious that I did not
Right.
realize. So a program like NA and AA is developed and does work to help you, to understand what's going on within you. And the people there are very supportive. And I recommend it, highly.
Awesome. Yeah. Don't have any comments to that. But I suppose that's true because
Well,
I have witnessed the 12 steps. I mean, I believe you. But I'm just trying to think from my own experience. I have witnessed the 12 steps, and yeah, there is no outright necessary belief in God or Jesus or any of them, Allah, Buddha, any of, it's just a submission to something greater than yourself and to acknowledge it's an act of humility. It's the ability to acknowledge that you are not the center of the universe, and because you are not the center of the universe, well, I would say a great deal of weight would probably be lifted off your shoulders in knowing that if you're not the center of the universe, something else is, and thus you don't have to support the universe on your own. You can surrender to that which does support the universe, whatever that is, whatever you need that to be. So even from
yeah.
a very, logical breakdown, that makes a great deal of sense. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people have been saved and recovered and helped through the 12 steps, but I would imagine at least hundreds of thousands, if not millions, maybe even more. And
Oh,
so,
yeah.
you know, what a blessing.
Well, yeah. And the biggest thing coming into recovery that you'll face is denial. That's the first step, is coming out of denial.
Right.
So that to me is represents darkness. It represents, just not having the truth.
Shedding
And
the
in the
darkness.
darkness, it's just beating you up and it's
Yeah.
killing you, man. And you're unaware, your eyes are closed, you're blind. You're blind to the truth, and you're just agreeing with these things that are not true about you. They're not true about the world, and it's just leading you further and further and making more pain. And so when you say, hey, I'm not God, you know, this is killing me. My life's unmanageable. It starts to open up the idea that something's going on here and I need to stop
Right.
and I need a different path. And so, any way you can get that is going to be good. Join a men's group and let out what you got going on, and let men challenge you so that they can bring you out of that denial, out of that darkness, out of that pit. Go to a church, man. But that's what they're going to do is these things you've been lying, agreeing to is lies, and you don't have to believe them no more. You can go a different way.
I mean, that ties right back to the gaining clarity that you mentioned in the beginning and the importance of that so that you can decipher the difference
Yes.
between what is true and what isn't true. And we're at a pretty good point to stop. So, I'm going to say my last bit by just saying, well, for me especially, because anytime I feel I have a message, it's always best to remind myself that that message applies to me just as much as it does to anybody else. Um, but especially if you know someone like you do and all the work you do as well, Matt. Um, but let this be the opportunity to unify ourselves, especially as a country that's horrifically divided. This is our place to see something that otherwise is dividing us and allow it to bring us together, that we can help people through some of these strategies that you've mentioned and through these deeper understandings of how to address a complex problem that I can say a lot of people hold quite closely too, because I know a great deal of people who have friends and family, um, or who have experienced people. I've experienced people on the streets who, you know, suffer from some form of addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs, it doesn't matter. This is just the topic of our conversation, but this is our opportunity to
Yeah.
come together and sow our own brokenness into something greater than ourselves. So I'm not sure if you have anything you want to add before we end recording and
No,
finish this
yeah,
chat.
sure, man. I just want to say, like, my posts and stuff, I'm not a political person. Not to say that we shouldn't be, but I'm just saying I try to be more spiritual in my life. But I want good. If it comes from a Democrat, I don't care. If it
Right,
comes from a Libertarian or a Republican, I don't care, man. I just want it to be good and to make sense, and the rest of it, like that's God. If people are being shady and under table, all that, whatever, that's not for me to. I can't control all that. Like you said earlier, some things we won't understand, and we have to just give it to God. But we do recover, man. People do heal. We
right.
do recover, and just I just love people, man. And anybody wants to reach out to me through Andrew or whatever, like I'll help any way I can. Help you find groups in your community, maybe some online groups, some links, some men's groups, something. We need connection. To me, the
Absolutely.
greatest pleasure the greatest pleasure in life is connection. You need pleasure. That's one of your needs. And I didn't realize that. I thought it was sex, but it's
Right.
not. It's not. For me, connection is greater than any pleasure on earth. And so if we get to connecting more, man, we'll get a lot more of that need met. So
Yeah, that that right, especially with the I lost my train of thought. Darn it. I was like, wow,
well,
that's such a
you
priceless point.
you
But
can
no,
see,
yeah,
yeah, I mean you can see that that's the purpose. There's a division, like you said in the beginning. You're on the left, I'm on the right. There's such a huge push to divide. That's a loss
right.
of connection.
It doesn't matter
That's one of our biggest needs.
where the it doesn't matter who, what side or who is taking the action, so to speak. And it speaks to the importance of having your own personal system of vetting truth or whatever it is, decisions, actions, any of it, but whoever's doing it, if it's truthful and it's honest, this is just me speaking, like this is just my own way of seeing it. If it is the truth to the best of my knowledge, if it brings glory to God and it helps people, then it's for a win. I don't care who's doing it. It could be someone I have a grievance with in the past, but if you're doing those things, then some part of me will rejoice over that because that's for the win.
Amen.
So, it was just making me think of the importance of having your own system of vetting things and saying, well, I believe in this and it's doing that, and I know in my heart that that is right. Like I said, for me, if it brings glory to God, then what a win. I can say I've experienced a great deal of things firsthand where I didn't want to do them. They were really difficult to do, but I knew if I did them, and it was because I could do them for a reason like bringing glory to God that I was able to do them because I had a bigger reason outside of myself. Just like if, helping people. Sometimes I don't want to help people, but if I know it really is going to help people, it's a bigger reason than outside of myself. It's a bigger reason outside of myself. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Good
in
deal.
doing that, it's amazing the connection you experience in doing that. And so Yeah, if you want to reach out to Matt, you know how to reach out to me through this channel on YouTube or through Facebook. You can always message the Hype Mind there, and I'd be happy to link you up with Matt or answer any of your questions myself. So, um, with that, dude, I really am grateful for this conversation. I'd like to catch up with you again
Yeah,
next
me
week
too.
sometime because I have something I want to share with you and get your opinion on that's been on my mind. So I look forward to sharing that. But thanks for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, yeah, love you, brother. Anytime. Amanda said hey too. She wanted me to tell you to say hey to you.
Tell her I said hey back, and I got another book for her if she finishes those. So
All right, sounds good. She's loving them.
great. Peace, brother.
See you, man. Have a good one.
God bless.